If it's in theaters, I won't be watching it in theaters. I will wait for it to be released at home. I don't know if it will be in theaters because it's a lot. I'm not 100% on Terrifier 3. I feel like Terrifier 2 just pushed it way too far for me, and it was good, don't get me wrong. But can I handle Terrifier 3 now? I saw it in theaters. Yes, I did. I put on my big girl pants and I was like, I'm gonna go to the theaters to watch this movie. This is my spooky Halloween gift to you guys to celebrate the season. Had this come out any other time of year, probably would not have prioritized it. But I thought it's Halloween, and what better movie to watch for Halloween than a Terrifier movie, I guess. So I dragged my friends to go see it so I didn't have to experience that alone, and I suffered through it, and now we're here. You're getting a review. I didn't even hate it. I did not hate this movie. I didn't hate my viewing experience of this movie. What I did hate was the crowd that I was in with this theater. So as you know, this movie is highly successful. It is, I believe, still #1 at the box office right now. It definitely beat Joker 2, which was wild that was the case. One, a horror movie beating a comic book movie in general is a feat, but also a Terrifier movie, which started as an indie film, as we know, to beat a movie like Joker 2 in the box office. Would never have anticipated that at all. Anyway, movie theater etiquette, people. People just do not know they don't know how to watch a movie, period, just even by themselves, and let alone with a bunch of strangers, okay? We all are experiencing main character syndrome. Why are we being so selfish in this setting? It's like you go outside of the theater and people, I can't even say are generally respectful, but you know, you're in the store, you're walking through the aisles. You put those people in a movie theater, and all of a sudden, it's free range to be as annoying as possible and disrespectful of those around you. I don't really understand what's going on. There was a family next to us that literally talked the entire time. They were narrating everything that was happening on screen. They were verbally reacting to everything happening on screen. And I just want to say the middle person in that was a child. Well, probably a teenager between her two parents. Couldn't think of a worse movie to do that with my parents with. Also, just to comment, the amount of children, young teens, even 12-ish, I want to say, lots of kids in the theater, in my theater. And I was like, what are we doing? After surviving Art the Clown's Halloween massacre, Sienna and her brother struggle to rebuild their shattered lives. As the holiday season approaches, they try to embrace the Christmas spirit and leave the horrors of the past behind. However, just when they think they're safe, Art returns, determined to turn their holiday cheer into a new nightmare. Now, obviously, I had originally said that I would not be watching Terrifier 3, especially not in theaters if I watched it at all. And that is, of course, because the teaser made it appear that Art the Clown would kill a child, and that's one of my harder lines, right? And so you're probably wondering, how did I survive this movie? First of all, multiple of you, I just want to thank for giving me a heads up on Instagram. You would message me after you saw it to let me know of any triggers that were in this. So I knew of a couple scenes that were in the movie that would probably be triggering to me personally. So knowing that going in and just having those little spoilers to expect really helped my experience. And obviously these movies push the limits beyond. However, I felt like everything that they did do in this movie was actually pretty well done. Can I say that? I am a Terrifier defender now, okay? After seeing this movie, you know what? I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of the Terrifier movies. Now, I had heard before, obviously Terrifier 2 pushed the boundaries when it came to horror and gore and everything with the famous bedroom scene, and people were saying that this movie was going to top that, and I was really scared and nervous, but they did indeed top it. There are many scenes that are as bad as the bedroom scene in this movie. You know, there are stories of people fainting from watching this, feeling nauseous and walking out of the theater completely. I get it. I totally get it. Usually those are for shock value to hype the movie up a little bit, and they're not necessarily true or not entirely true. But in this situation, I genuinely believe it. And plus, Spooky Astronauts had her own experience while watching this movie in theaters. So I believe it. I believe after seeing this why people would feel a little lightheaded while watching this. Now let's get into the actual review, I guess. It's hard to review this movie because what I would normally critique a movie on, I feel like is different with the Terrifier film, because Terrifier is very obviously full of gore, and in this movie it was very, very realistic, and that I think is what contributed to people being a little faint and disturbed while watching this movie, rightfully so. Because it is a 10 out of 10 when it comes to gore. I have never in my life probably seen a gorier movie than this. Maybe some movies have more blood, like the Evil Dead remake, but gore-wise, like body gore, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a movie that I could think of that is gorier than Terrifier 3. So if body horror and gore and things are not your thing, don't watch this movie. Don't watch it. That being said, Terrifier, the movies aren't for everyone, okay? Very clearly. And a lot of people, for some reason, Terrifier has been bringing up this debate, which we'll actually get to later. Let's finish the review and we'll talk about the debate of some things and content that is allowed in horror or should be allowed, etc. Now, one thing that people do argue about these movies is that there's no story, there's no plot, and it's just gore. And you know what movies people also said that about back in the day? Saw. And I won't deny that people watch Saw movies for the gore and the traps, but I think over the years and as the Saw movies progressed, we started to get more attached to the story. And if you watch the first movie and say that there's no story or there's no point or plot in that movie, then you're watching a different movie than me personally, because I love the first movie. I think it's incredible, story-wise, character dynamic, everything like that. I thought was really effective. And then yeah, we get a little bit more focused on the traps, but a lot of them do have a story. I don't know why people say that about Saw movies, and Terrifier is the exact same thing. There is a story there, and I don't know if the people who are arguing these things have actually watched all three of them. Now, when the first one came out, obviously, that one was campy, it was goofy, more of an indie film. The director himself did a lot of the special effects for the movie. In fact, he also did for Terrifier 2, and Terrifier 3 is the first time that he did not do the special effects for the movie. So as we've progressed, the indie film became less indie, as we know. No studio wanted to touch it with 10-foot pole, which I'm sure they're regretting now. So yes, you could argue the first one doesn't have like a clear story or character development or anything like that, and it's just Art the Clown picking on some people, okay? But then we get into the second and the third one, and I really enjoyed the continuation of Sienna's storyline from the second one into the third. And I thought it was very believable, and, you know, with the time jump and everything, and her having visions and hallucinations. And that was a cool way to incorporate even more like disturbing imagery and a lot of callbacks to the second movie. So yes, the plot of the Terrifier movies is probably the weakest point of the movies, especially with like how they're trying to answer some certain questions in the end of Terrifier 3. I wasn't a huge fan of like where they ended up taking the story and explaining certain characters and things, and just, you know, how it kind of all works. I didn't like the direction it went in, not gonna lie. I was like, of course they're going to make that the reason why, of course they're gonna go that route. But I don't think the lack of story, I can't even say lack of story, I don't think the strong story or like the really well done, thought out story and plot and everything, character dynamics, I don't think the lack of that is going to stop people from enjoying these movies. So what if people just watch these for the gore? So what if Saw, the most enjoyable part of that is the gore? Who cares? Like, it's for entertainment purposes. If you get entertainment from just the gore alone, then that's the point of the movie, right? I actually really enjoyed how the story in Terrifier 3 also not only brought it back to Terrifier 2, and we got a continuation of Sienna's story, but it also brought us right back around to Terrifier 1. And I liked that because I loved the pale girl as his accomplice in Terrifier 2, and so I was hoping they would do something similar in Terrifier 3. I had seen some memes before going in, so I knew who they were going to be working with, right? And I was happy to see that. I thought that was a cool way to include the first movie, and instead of ignoring it, you know, I feel like if they didn't do that and they just had the pale girl again or something, it would kind of ignore the first movie. But now we've had it like a continuation of all the stories come back together. So I actually enjoyed my experience of this. Was it very, very gory and disturbing? Yes, but this is one of those times where I feel like the gore gets to be so extreme, and like the what's happening is like so over the top that it becomes kind of ridiculous. And again, that will take some people out, but I think it adds to it and almost cuts the tension a little bit, because yes, it's very disturbing and they push it to the ultimate limits. However, it gets so ridiculous that it's like, okay, well, you can just kind of laugh at it now. I actually like the comedy aspect of this. I really enjoyed laughing at parts of this movie. I think Art the Clown is really funny. And I do want to just take a moment to say that I'm actually really grateful to be a horror fan in this time, because I feel like we get Art the Clown. It's doing so well at the box office. People are taking horror movies more seriously and kind of respecting them more as an art form. And I love Art the Clown as a villain. As soon as I saw him, the first time I ever saw him, I was obsessed with him. And I did a cosplay of him, like a little makeup tutorial video of him a while ago on my other channel. I love Art the Clown visually as a character. I think he's hilarious. And with all of that, he's also horrifying. Like, he's genuinely terrifying, naturally. And one part of this movie did make me emotional, and I felt like I could have cried if I let myself, but I was like, why would I cry at a Terrifier movie? But there was one scene that was genuinely so sad to me, and maybe I'll talk about it in a second. Should I do spoilers in this video? I wasn't intending to. I didn't like script out any spoilers, but maybe I'll do some at the end to talk about that one scene that I could have cried at because it was just so sad. So I don't want to hear that there's no plot or story or anything behind these movies besides gore, because I teared up at a scene. Now I want to address why some people are not huge fans of this franchise and kind of their arguments. The main one being it's misogynistic. Maybe you could have said that about Terrifier, the first movie, and the director Damien's intent behind Art, or the inspiration behind Art, given that he focuses primarily on women in the first movie, and that was kind of Damien's ideas, like Art is harassing women on the train, right? Now I don't necessarily think because his first victims in the first movie were women, that makes him a misogynist automatically. You know, I don't necessarily believe that. Also, I feel like he heard all of that critique and made Terrifier 3. So if you believe that these movies are misogynistic, watch Terrifier 3, because let me tell you, some of the most graphic deaths are indeed men. And he kills plenty of men as well in Terrifier 2. Granted, the major, most disturbing one was a woman, of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all the like major disturbing deaths are always women, because there were plenty in Terrifier 3 that were men. And then I have been seeing a lot of discourse, specifically on Twitter, around killing children in movies is wrong and should not be used as a form of horror or entertainment or anything like that. Now, as you know, that is one of my hard lines. I laugh because I watched Terrifier 3 in theaters. I will confirm that children are not off limits in Terrifier 3. However, this is a perfect example of the way that you can do things that are triggering to people, such as SA or children involved, things like that, and still make it not gratuitous and not exploitative. Because I thought what they did in Terrifier 3 definitely still pushed the boundaries and pushed the limits, especially my own, but in a tasteful way that it wasn't gratuitous like the other deaths are, or like extreme like the other deaths are. And my belief is that nothing should be completely off limits, which I'm sure you're surprised to hear me say that, because I have said many movies that I will not be watching or supporting or anything like that. So I'm sure you're surprised to hear me say that. But hey, it's called growth. I might contradict myself from in the past, but that's okay. I'm growing as a human and as a horror fan. I think what matters most about these triggering subjects is how the movie handles it without being exploitative of those things. And while I may have my own limits when it comes to what I'm willing to watch on screen, when it comes to SA and children specifically, those are the two things that I don't want to see on screen, and there are many movies I won't watch because of those things. While I have my own limits, I do not expect horror movies to abide by my boundaries. So So as an art form, I don't think horror should necessarily be super limited. I just have to accept that there's going to be movies that are outside of my own comfort zone, and that's okay. Like I said before, the Terrifier movies are not for everyone. There are some people who are very triggered by gore and just seeing that level of gore. And so these movies are not made for them who would not find entertainment value in the movies. Now, in saying that, my opinion only goes so far as to when it's not exploitative. If it is graphic, exploitative, gratuitous, then my opinion will change a little bit. And there are definitely movies out there, Serbian film, for instance, that push the boundaries way beyond what I think is acceptable. So I have my own opinion of what's acceptable. You have yours. Some people think that art killing kids is not acceptable. But I do also want to recognize the other argument where people are saying that others are acting like Terrifier's the first movie to actually kill kids, which is definitely not the case. And there are plenty of examples where they do indeed do that, and maybe Terrifier 3 pushes it a little bit further with what we're actually visually seeing on screen and maybe conceptually, because there was definitely a scene that made my mouth drop, and I'll talk about that. But for the most part, I feel like Terrifier didn't do a too bad of job handling this, and I would say to give it a chance and to not just write it off as a misogynistic, killing kids kind of movie, because that's definitely not what this was. Like I said, I'm a Terrifier defender till the day I die. These movies are great. They're very fun and great with friends, like to watch in a group or at a Halloween party or something, because people will be squirming, but do warn them, you know, let them know what they're in for. Let me do a couple spoilers just to tell you the scene that made my jaw drop, which there was only one. There was only one scene, can you believe it? That made my jaw drop, and then the one that made me cry. So firstly, with the opening scene, that honestly didn't bother me as much as I thought it was going to. All of the deaths of the children are off camera, which is one of the ways I think you can use that concept and that element of horror without being gratuitous about it if you're not showing it. I mean, look at Dr. Sleep, who spoiler for Dr. Sleep, I guess, but there's a scene in that movie that was way more disturbing, I think, than Terrifier 3 was with the children. Because when you actually cut from hearing things happening to seeing the aftermath, and I don't know, I feel like I have watched so many movies, I can have that separation in my head of like, well, that's not real. That boy that was killed in that opening scene had nothing to do with the scene at all. Like, that is a fake body. So like, he didn't have to pretend to die, for instance. Whereas the Dr. Sleep movie, so I just find it a little bit ironic that there is such an outrage over Terrifier 3. And this is coming from someone who is triggered by death of children in movies. Anyway, the scene that did really surprise me, that I had no idea, I can't believe I didn't see it coming, the bomb scene in the mall. Oh my God. I'm used to Art the Clown hacking up some people, okay? Using any kind of weapon, even a gun sometimes, right? I'm used to that. What I'm not used to is him using a bomb at the mall and having it being surrounded by children. Like, jaw on the floor. Again, it's more of a concept than what we see visually with that scene, and I loved that they did that. Now, we see some things, you know, obviously this is a Terrifier movie. We're gonna see the aftermath. We're gonna see some gore here. But again, it's not so in your face about it. Maybe it is. Maybe I shouldn't say it's not in your face. This one particular scene, I felt like, I don't know. I liked the scene. I thought it was so shocking, like the most shocking scene out of the whole movie as far as like the surprise element. And that's the only time this movie like really got me and like really shocked me. It wasn't the only scene that like made me squirm or made me want to look away. Obviously we had the bathroom scene, which is probably going to be the most infamous. And I love that they made it a man. They made the most infamous scene the death of a man. So I feel like Damien heard all the critiques of these movies being misogynistic and just said, okay, you want men? then here you go. And then what could be more messed up than hacking a man in half with a chainsaw up the legs? We did that once with a woman. Here you go with a guy. So the scene that made me kind of emotional, or like want to get emotional, was with the Aunt Jessica and her daughter. So Victoria had put a head in a cage in between Sienna and her aunt, and she implied or said that like, oh, that's your daughter right there, that's Jenny. And obviously the aunt gets very emotional, and that was hard enough to watch. But then they kill the aunt in the rat scene. Why is no one talking about the rat scene? Like that whole scene, the concept, the disturbing nature of the rat scene. Everyone's talking about the bathroom scene, which I get why. It was very intense, but like the rats, come on. They shove a giant plastic tube down her throat, you know, hammer it in, and then put some rats down her throat. And then they come out, you know. I'm trying not to get too graphic about it. But anyway, so the reason why that made me upset was because the mother died thinking her daughter's head was sitting in front of her, but then it was revealed that that's not her daughter's head, that Jenny is still alive, and then she comes in and everything. And then it's the brother's head. So all together, the emotions of that scene was just so tragic. One, the mom thinking that's her daughter's head, and then dying thinking so. And then after she dies, the daughter actually comes out, so she doesn't even know that her daughter's alive. As a mother to a daughter, I could not imagine dying thinking I was just staring at my daughter's head. So to me, that was just really tragic. And then finding out the brother's head, it was just a lot. It's a lot of emotions going on in that scene towards the end. So, and then the surprising element was that they went the demonic route, and I can't remember if they ever hinted at it being demonic before, because we know that Art the Clown is a supernatural entity because he's been beheaded and he's been killed, you know, every single time. So we know he's supernatural, but I thought it was like Mike Myers. We don't know what it is. We don't know how or why, he just is. And then they went the demonic route. I don't know if they are explaining necessarily that Art the Clown is demonic himself, or if it's just Victoria being possessed by a demon and wanting to enter Sienna's body as a vessel, you know? So I thought that got a little bit convoluted, and I just we don't need another religious horror movie, okay? So can we stop with the demons? Can we stop with the religion? I just need a break, okay? I just was a little bit blindsided that this movie turned into something demonic. Anyway, those are all my thoughts on Terrifier 3. I had a good time. I think I'd give it like 3.5 stars total, just because, yeah, the plot and the ending and the storyline doesn't really necessarily work for me. But I thought it was a decent continuation of the story, and Damien did confirm that there will be, I think, at least 2 more movies, but he did say that the next one would end the Art the Clown story, so I'm not sure what is going to happen there. I don't honestly think it needs another one, but I could see why they'd want to round out the story a little bit better. I think they should have done that with this one. If I could change anything, I would definitely have finished off the story with the third one and just made it a trilogy. I think that would be just fine. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on Terrifier 3. It is a very controversial franchise in general, so let me know where you fall. Just, you know, be respectful. If we're gonna argue in the comments or argue with people, can we just like respect other people's opinions that could also, you know, be valid for them, please? So yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.